From being sold out for years to having hundreds stolen, the Playdate was in such high demand when it first launched. But now that supply has caught up to demand, and those stolen Playdates have been rightfully united with their creators, they're finally accessible to anyone who wants them. The question is, in 2024, do you still want a Playdate? The awesome folks at Panic sent me a Playdate to try out, and it is a charming little handheld. They teamed up with the hardware wizards at Teenage Engineering, and they knocked it out of the park. The yellow is bright and fun, and the material feels smooth to the touch, almost rubbery. Its aesthetic feels like if the playfulness of childhood met modern adulthood, and I love it. The buttons are satisfyingly clicky, and the crank is smooth as butter. I initially thought that this crank was a gimmick, but once I started playing some games with it, it became my favorite part of the system. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll expand more on the crank when we get there. The screen is definitely a hit or miss for some people, but I'm about to drop a real controversial take here. I love it. Going with a 1-bit screen with no backlight does an amazing job of making the visuals pop. If this were backlit, the light bleed would ruin the effect. Using the Playdate Mirror app on my PC drives my opinion home. The Mirror app lets you cast what's on your Playdate screen to your PC, but the PC version never looks as good as what it does on the actual Playdate. Not being able to play my Playdate in the dark is a little annoying, but honestly, it's a worthwhile trade-off because this screen is beautiful when it works. The hardware makes for a cool little toy, but it needs software to match for it to be worthwhile. After all, the PS5 is a solid piece of hardware, but that doesn't stop people from making jokes about it having no games. Thankfully, a lot of great developers have stepped up to the plate to build a solid library for the Playdate. The Playdate is the definition of limitations breeding creativity. It's a system with fewer colors than the original Game Boy, but developers have used it to make gorgeous art. It has fewer buttons than any handheld to hit the mainstream, but developers have used its controls to craft tight experiences. The more a game plays into the Playdate's hardware, the better it feels. You can't just port a game to it, you've got to build for it, and that's why it stands out. All of its best experiences are wholly unique. Your Playdate comes with 24 games for free, with 2 delivered each week for 12 weeks, referred to as Season 1. I haven't actually gotten to try all of them yet, since I've only had this for a few months, but there's still plenty of them for me to play. The games that I've tried are all varied and play to the Playdate's strengths in different ways. Omaze is a platform that breaks my brain a little bit, requiring some fine crank control to move the player. Crankin's Time Travel Adventure makes for a silly use of the crank to control gameplay. Lost Your Marbles uses the crank to control the game in a fashion that feels similar to Super Monkey Ball, but in 2D. All 3 of these use the Playdate's crank in unique and fun ways, allowing for gameplay that you can't really get from any other system. The one exception is Pick Pack Pup, a puzzle game that doesn't use the crank, and in theory could be on any other system. However, no matter what system this is on, I'd still love it. It's a charming puzzle game with cute art and a great sense of humor. These are only 4 of the 24 games available through Season 1. I've only unlocked 14 so far, and I haven't even played all of them yet. That said, this season has some serious bangers, and that's not all the Playdate has to offer. There's an entire catalog of games to pick from, most in the $3 to $9 range, which I think is fair for indie titles of this size. It's not the same price you'd pay for a similar experience in the DSi or 3DS games, or the cost of a phone game before we devolved into a microtransaction-driven society. The catalog manages to expand the Playdate's library into even more genres. Dance Break Dance and Touch Egg are both variations on Red Light Green Light, where you spin the crank as quickly as possible to get the high score, but stopping in time to avoid a game over. One is a trippy, Cartoon Network-esque romp, where you bust as many moves as you can until the music stops. And the other is borderline horror, with a goofy sense of humor. Both manage to be addictive and a blast for short bursts of fun. I just avoid playing them out and about because I get really weird looks when I frantically try to crank it in public. Root Bear, yes, Root Bear, not root beer, finds a great use of the crank as well. You use it to control a tap when serving root beer. While it's a pretty simple game loop, the bear's reactions to your performance always get me every time I play, and chasing a high score is always fun. Trade in that tap for a Rolodex, and you get Recommendation Dog, a game about flipping through your Rolodex to find the perfect person for a job. I especially love this one because the crank just feels so intuitive for it. Plus, who can resist the cuteness of a business pup? I never thought I'd use the Playdate for reading, but the Playbook app also lets you use it as an e-reader. The 1-bit screen is about as close to e-ink as you're gonna get, and using the crank lets you scroll through a book at a pleasant pace. Faraway Fairway is a zen endless golfer that doesn't keep score. It's just good vibes. You control the direction and power of your swing with, you guessed it, the crank. It offers fine control that you really can't get from other controllers. Realistic Fishing does the obvious and lets you control your reel with the crank, but it doesn't stop there. The crank controls your oars when you're traveling, or your harpoon when sky fishing. It also has such a charming world as well. Aligned is where the crank really clicked for me though. By spinning the crank, you move around the board to pick where to place your piece, and it's the most in control I've ever felt in a game. Notice what makes these games shine? It's the crank. All of these games use it in their own unique ways, making for a gaming experience you can't really find on any other console. I also want to shout out Deep Space Dapper Squad and Gun Trails for showing what kind of gorgeous art is possible on the Playdate. While these don't really use the crank, they push the single color screen to its limits and make for must-haves on the Playdate as well. These aren't even all the games I've played on the Playdate, let alone all the games I've enjoyed. The catalog is filled with dozens of neat little gems, and they're all worth a look. I haven't even gotten into the variety of titles available on itch.io as well, many of which are free and easy to sideload onto your device. That's the joy of development for the Playdate. The tools are so easily accessible that it opens the field for devs that might not have been able to release a title otherwise. I think you can already tell how I feel about the Playdate. It's a solid piece of hardware that feels premium and offers something unique that other game systems can't. Its black and white screen and small button count might make it seem like it'd be lacking, but these limits breed creativity, and developers have made some amazing experiences that you couldn't get anywhere else. I'll admit, I've been kinda burnt out on video games lately, but the Playdate has sparked that fire in me again. If you're a fan of novelties, retro titles, and indie games like me, this is a must-have. The Playdate manages to be something that every console wants to be. Fun. And I think that's the most important thing. So what do you think? Are you interested in getting a Playdate, or do you have one already? If you do, let me know your favorite game in the comments. Thanks for watching my video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!